You're listening to the Bombad Generals.
General? Oh.
Alrighty, hello and welcome back to another episode of the Bombad Generals. Of course, it's me, Matt, and we've got Seth. Seth, how you doing?
I'm well. How are you, Matt?
I'm pretty good, but someone who's associated with this podcast is not pretty good.
No.
What's up with Todd? The drama continues.
Yeah, so unfortunately with it being May the 4th, biggest Star Wars holiday ever, Todd is like hungover drunk.
Too much blue milk.
Too much
that
blue
he was
milk.
imbibing.
It's pretty unprofessional of him. Not condoning drinking or anything, but hey, Todd, you have responsibilities. Get it together, man. That's all we gotta say.
Yeah, that's where we'll leave that. So,
Yep.
Hopefully everyone else was enjoying May the 4th. Always good. And this we're getting that sweet spot right between May the 4th and Revenge of the 6th. So I don't know what the 5th is, or is it Revenge of the 5th? I don't know. Anyways,
No, it's Revenge of the Sith and then like Return of the 6th.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay. Well, good thing
think.
on Revenge of the 5th, we have two light side preferred guys doing the podcast. Anyways, enough on that. Today, we're talking Measurement 101. So
Measurement 101.
We've been doing a lot of 101s. Don't despair. We're going to be doing some other stuff in the future, of course. But this one ties in really well with Movement 101 because, we talked a lot about movement in terms of, inches, 4 inches, 6 inches, 8 inches, all of that. They tie in really well together, so it makes sense to have them back to back.
Yeah.
So let's just get right into it. Range tools. We had a big debate pre-show. What's a range tool versus
What is a
what's
range
not?
tool?
Range tool segments is, I think, the official term. Range bands. They're 6 inches each. Exactly. For our European listeners, that's like a lot of centimeters. But don't think of in centimeters. Apologies.
Think of it in inches.
Yeah, it makes much more sense. It's much cleaner.
Most men know the length of 6 inches, or do they?
Yeah.
Yes.
I
anyways.
wish. Anyways, so that means the table. I like to think of the table in terms of ranges, right? So 6 feet by 3 feet. It means that you're range 12 by range 6. Mm-hmm. You can, TTS is actually kind of good for this. It's got if you turn on the grid, it breaks it all down into range 1 by range 1 squares.
Yep.
All the deployment zones fall within those, right? So your battle lines, you're going to be range 1 up. It's range 6 across, so you start just beyond range 4 of each other. We talked about that a bit in movement as far as like, hey, that's why recon intel can be good, because then you can get into that range 4. Then you can move and shoot at range 3. If you want, with a standard speed 2 move on a small base trooper. But then you also have stuff like long march, right? Range 3 on either side means you're starting range 6 from each other because you're going the long way. Starting range 4 from each other versus starting range 6 from each other, that changes a lot how you approach turn 1. And turn 0. If I'm playing breakthrough and I know I have to do go range 4 versus range 6, that's 2 extra move actions, essentially. Instead of getting there in 5 move actions minimum with against small base trooper unit, now I'm getting there in 7 move actions. And we can, thinking about action wise, you only get a maximum of 12 in a game. So you need to know ahead of time how much you need to be stingy or not with those. So that's the start, I think. Think about the board in terms of ranges, because ranges are fundamental to the game. What are some other fundamental concepts when it comes to range?
Yeah, so obviously every attack has a range to it. So some of your attacks have, you have like different range bands. For instance, like you have like, Palpatine's attack. It's range 1 to 2. So anything at range 1 to 2, he can attack. Then you go up to like your average assault rifle 1 to 3, kind of like a more, and then you heavy weapon 1 to 4. Anything within range 1 to 4, and then you have like range 1 to 5 snipers, and then also infinity. So you have different range bands there. Which the only 2 infinity right now are the sniper rifles of Cassian and Iden Versio.
And some Bombard cards, like command cards and such.
So some Bombard cards are a little bit different. They're 4 to infinity, so they have to be at 4 or past that. So if they're in 3 at all, they're not a legal target because they're too close to you. That's the same like with like a rocket launcher, like for the RPS is like range 2 to 4. So if something is within like range 1, you cannot attack it because it's not a legal target because it's too close. But yeah, we'll get more into that later. But then you also have like range. Some people call it range 0, but it's like base contact.
Don't. I think that's an X-Wing thing. X-Wing, if you're touching, you're at range 0. In Legion, that doesn't exist. Sometimes people think melee is range 0, but think about it. If you're if melee was range 0, something like force push would never work. It says you target a unit at range 1. If you are in base contact, you are still at range 1. Melee is just a signifier of a certain condition being met, which is base to base contact. It is not a range.
I think a good thing to kind of distinguish this is that there's engagement and then there's base contact. So for instance, I can be in base contact, like a trooper unit can be in base contact with a vehicle, but not be engaged. So I can still use like my range attacks, and range attacks can still be attacked against me. And even the vehicle that I'm in base contact with can attack me, even though I'm in base contact, because I'm not engaged. Now, if you're engaged with another trooper unit,
but it can still only attack you with melee weapons. If you are in base to base, if you are in melee, regardless of engagement or not, it's still going to be melee weapons. But technically you are, but that's its own rule. It's not because you're at range 0 and it's a range 1 weapon. That's not the reason. So if you've got that in your head from X-Wing or other games that I'm maybe not familiar with, just don't think about range 0.
Yeah, totally different game. But then, like, if you're in base contact with another trooper, you are then engaged, and that's where like ranged attacks cannot you cannot be targeted by ranged attack. And so there's some different fundamentals of measuring when it comes to range bands. Yeah,
and one of the other things that you were talking about, I guess a couple things. We talked about Bombard cards. I think when minimum ranges get involved, there's sometimes a bit of confusion. Like you see, when we're talking about Bombard cards, we're talking about like the Leia 1-pip, the Veers 1-pip, the
Air Support 2-pip.
Blizzard Force 2-pip.
You have the Orbital Strike 2-pip.
Yeah. All of those things, big long range attacks coming from command cards. You see something like Leia and it says 4 to infinity. And a lot of times I see some people think, okay, I put down my range 4 tool and they have to be beyond that. But it's saying 4 is still the minimum range. It's still legal. So as you said very correctly, they can't be at 3. They can be at 4. So when you look at 4 to infinity, don't get your range 4 tool out. Get your range 3 tool out and just see, hey, are they beyond range 3? And that kind of gets us into at, within, and beyond. Yes. So beyond range 3 is the same as at range 4 to affinity. Beyond means that no part of you is in that range, right? Important caveat again with fundamentals. A unit, when you're measuring, units can only be, at one range. If I'm measuring to a unit and one guy in the unit is at range 3, one guy at the unit is at range 4, one guy could even be at range 5. They could span 3 range bands. It's going to be the closest. So that unit is at range 3 in that example. They are beyond range 2, but you're measuring to the closest. So beyond, pretty self-explanatory. At means any part of you is touching that
even if
segment.
Just a sliver of the base.
Slightest little bit.
It's still in it.
And then within is fully within. If you are within range 3, your whole squad is inside range 3. Every single part of you, or the whole token, because objective cards talk about tokens being within range. So in that earlier example, where a unit is spread across a bunch of ranged bands, they're at range 3, but they're only within range 5. Because part of them goes all the way out to range 5, so they would not be within range 3 or 4, they're within range 5. Be careful this, I'm not sure how MCP does it, but I know Shatterpoint, the new rules coming out for that, uses within, like Legion uses at. There's probably going to be a lot of crossover. Even Legion players might go play a bunch of that, come back. Make sure you don't get the two wires crossed, because within means something very different in the two games.
Thankfully, there's not a ton of within rules in the game right now. One of the things I can think of is like lead from the front. I think it's one of the 1 pips for the 501st, where again, if it's like a unit of 5, all 5 bases have to be within that range band, even if one of them is slightly out, like it's not within, unfortunately. So that's just the whole base has to be in it, the whole unit. Even includes like for your whole like saber tank has to be within the thing. Not that the saber tank applies to lead from the front. Just an example.
Yeah, if there's a lead from the front like ability, a saber tank could never really benefit.
Nope.
Because a saber tank can never be within 1 of everything. It's big.
No.
It's too big.
It's too big. Yes.
Yeah. Again, not a problem I've ever experienced. But when we're talking about different range segments, what if only one number is shown? This is different than how it used to be.
Yeah.
Right?
So this is a new thing that AMG has came out with, especially with the CRB.
Yes. So you think about someone like IG-11. When he released, the rules said at range 2 was different than at range 1 to 2. There's a donut, right? At range 2 meant 2, and if you were at range 1, you were not at range 2. Now, at is a bit more inclusive, or I should say, when one number is shown, it is the maximum range.
Yes.
So if a number says at range 2, really, it's at 1 to 2, where 1 is the minimum and 2 is the maximum.
Yes.
So the things that this applies to would be IG-11 2-pip, the commander, getting his ability Ruthless. Triggers at range 2, which is really 1 to 2. And then a casualty of this change, not so much casualty, more so stealth buff, was the Shadow Collective Mando rockets. They do not have a minimum range, I believe, because when they were designed, they did not want you to combo their rocket with their native range 3 gun.
Yes.
So they gave it only range 4. So the card just says 4 on it. However, now, if one number is shown, that is a maximum. So now the Shadow Collective Mando rockets are range 1 to 4.
Now you can combo it.
You could combo it with their range 3 gun. You could combo it with their range 2 gun. And then give that pool blast, critical, all that good stuff. Or just shoot 4 rockets at range 2 if you really want to. But math-wise, a combination of rocket and normal guns is preferred. So that's some basics. Let's go into attacks. We talked about attacks and how those are measured. How is measuring for an attack different than measuring for any other ability?
Yeah, so for just talking about attacks, you always measure the unit that is trying to perform the attack. You always measure from the unit leader. So the unit leader has to be at the range of the unit that is trying to attack. Now, you do not have to measure the defending unit. You don't have to measure to the opposing unit leader. You just have to measure to any one of the models or any part of the model to get it within range. So for instance, like if I have a squad of 5 guys, I try to shoot, and one of my opponent cohered one of their guys forward, I can like get them within range 3 or at range 3 without being at range 3 of their unit leader. So there's a little bit of a trick there. Kind of like where that's kind of like where flanks kind of matter and is really helpful, because you can get those. You can shoot them without them shooting you back like instantaneously.
Yeah, this is why the rule of thumb is generally never cohere your guys closer to the enemy. Always cohere them backwards.
Yes.
Right? Because if you cohere forwards, you open up that exact scenario you outlined where, hey, I can move up. Because it's a unique way of measuring, everything else in the game is mini to mini, closest mini to closest mini.
Everything.
In the case of only attacks, it's unit leader of attacking unit to any mini. So I can measure from my unit leader to your cohered guy who came forward. that's range 3. But if your unit leader is further back than that guy, when he measures to my squad, if my farthest forward guy is outside range 3, you might not get an attack back. Especially, if you're playing a range 3 gun line and you've got, maybe courage 1 core, I move up, shoot your guy, now you're suppressed, maybe you don't roll it off, you can't move and shoot me back. So that's why generally you want to be cohering backwards. Another misconception I think I see a lot is about like heavy weapons. And if my heavy weapon, let's say I've got Echo in a arc squad, right? I measure range 5 from the unit leader. Well, this is a terrible example actually, because Echo is the unit leader. Forget that. Let's say
just do a sniper, just a DC 15 sniper.
Yeah, a DC 15
full arc squad.
X. Yeah, DC 15X. Heavy weapon who is not the unit leader. So unit leader is just barely at range 5 of the other unit. The heavy weapon is cohered backwards. That physical model is beyond range 5 of the unit you're attacking, but it doesn't matter. The range is determined by the unit leader. Yep. So keep that in mind. Again, we already talked about if a unit's at multiple ranges, it's going to be the closest. One other kind of marginal effect, but it affects a few units. Some things are immune to range 1. Things like your T-47 airspeeder and your NASP fluttercraft and your LAT.
I believe the LAT
that might be everything.
Pretty much
but those are all
tall boys. Yeah.
Yeah, the tall boys, exactly. The idea is, hey, they're flying way up in the air. Immune range 1 just means that if the maximum range of a weapon is range 1, it cannot affect that unit. So I cannot throw impact grenades at a T-47. That's kind of that, and mines is kind of why this rule exists. The T-47 again used to kind of suck, and it really sucked when someone had like impact grenades on their snow troopers back in the day and could just walk up and throw impact 4 into your white save 175 point armor unit. It was really bad. Or minefield, they didn't want minefield like blowing up airspeeders. So that's why that exists. If I've got a full squad that has like, range 1 to 2 guns and they're sitting under, let's say I've got my Black Sun enforcers with the Magdet sitting underneath a airspeeder.
Yeah.
The unit's at range 1, I can still attack it, just not with the Magdet itself, because that's a maximum range 1. So that guy has to use the regular weapon. That reminds me of another thing we didn't really mention. Measuring range is always 2D top down. Angles, elevation, doesn't matter. Nope. I could have a guy who's up at height 3 and a guy who's down on the surface. I'm only measuring that horizontal distance between them.
Yep.
So keep that in mind.
Do not angle your range tools at all. Just keep it. Now, we mentioned cohering forward, and we encourage do not cohere forward because of the whole range unit leader and everything. But there is one instance where cohering forward could work, and that is, you've done this against me while playing Darks, is that if you're trying to get in close contact with a unit with like a heavy weapon. So for instance, you with your Darks, I had an RPS squad. What you did was you moved up and cohered a dude within range 1 of my unit leader, or at range 1 of my unit leader, so that my heavy weapon, because my heavy weapon is range 2 to 4, and because you have a unit within range 1 of my unit leader, or a model within range 1 of my unit leader, I could not
at range 1.
I could not attack with my heavy weapon. I could not contribute my heavy weapon into that attack because it was in the minimum range, or like that you were in the not allowed range.
Yeah, I'm too close. It's too close.
Were too close. Yeah.
I do this.
It's a trick to use. That's the only time where you actually encourage cohering forward, or like
unless there's space issues and that kind of stuff.
Different ways, but
honestly, when you started down that path, I had no idea what you were talking about. But I'm a genius. That's great plays. You say that reminds me. That's also a great trick. We're seeing a lot of RPSs these days because of Dark Troopers and clones needing armor answers, and Dark Troopers are wanting to get close, so why not just get super close so they can't use the RPS? Because they can't move away and shoot, that thing's cumbersome.
They can't get similarly.
Similarly, mortars, the shore mortars are really popular, or at least should be. Like, they're awesome. I love them. They're really good. I wish Rebels had them. But they have a minimum range of 3. They're range 3 to 4. So if you're getting close, again, with Dark Troopers or some other unit, if you cohere forward a little bit and get inside that medium range, they're not going to be, or that minimum range. So if you get at range 2, then they're going to have to, shoot you with their rifle, which is not good.
Or shoot a different unit. Again,
mortars are not cumbersome, or mortars are cumbersome. They cannot move back and shoot you. So really good point, actually, about how you can kind of manipulate that. But since we're on the topic of manipulating ranges with cohesion, yes, this gets us into the much funner topic, I would say, about non-attacks.
Yes.
Because when you start saying, hey, range is closest mini to closest mini, you can start doing a lot of really interesting stuff to play around with ranges because your bubbles get a lot bigger. I guess I'll kind of start with this one. Neither of us are droid players, but B1s, right? When you're talking about coordinate droid trooper, then coordinate is a range 1 effect, but you could have a B1 unit leader coheres 4 inches out to the side because that's a speed 1 move, then 6 inches between them, then another B1 from another squad who is cohered inwards, right? So you can have a maximum of almost, because again, those slightly under 4 inches, you could have 14 inches between the unit leaders, and the units are still at range 1 of each other because of that extra guy who's been cohered outwards. Now, of course, if I kill enough guys and you want to defeat that miniature, now you're going to be outside of range. So be careful about that. But that's an example of something you can manipulate ranges.
Same
clone
thing with
token sharing.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, you're the clone guy. Tell the world.
Oh, it's the same concept. It's just like you can cohere out, and that's where your bubble. Like a lot of people, I need to put my clones super close to together. Not really. You can have a good range 2 bubble of them, so you have a little bit more range, spread out. But to where they're able to share tokens because you're cohering your dudes closer to each other, and so that's just an extra layer of cohesion that you have to think about when playing droids or when playing clones. Same concept if you're playing with a unit with take cover or something, you can still cohere back. You have those supporting commanders in the back, so you can cohere back so that unit is within range 1 to then pass out those dodges. Just a cool trick just to keep in mind. And it's never unit leader to unit leader. It's always mini to mini. Mini
to mini. So that brings us to kind of another example of a time maybe you would cohere forward. You've got a full forward extended clone unit. You've got a guy in the back. You want to move up and share a token, so maybe move up and aim. Hey, maybe you need to forward cohere a little bit to get that range 1 of the squad in front, right? So that's an example of, hey, I want to get those ranges. When I deploy a unit, let's say I've got some chaff core, a bunch of naked fleets or rebel troopers, I'm just kind of putting them down. I'll try to cohere them wide. If I think, if I have kind of, maybe I'll go on the left side of the board, maybe I'll go on the right. I want to see what my opponent does. If I cohere them narrowly, it's easier for them to get caught outside of the commander range bubble because they just take up less footprint. If you cohere them outwards, then I could put my commander in a lot more spots and still capture everybody with the command bubble. Lots of examples like that where being a little bit wider just gives you a bigger net of here's what range 1 to this unit looks like. When Dark Troopers came out, at first people were like, retinue, you need a commander at range 2. That's you don't want a squishy commander for that because they'll have to get too close to the action. That's why you want Gideon, because he's got red surging saves. But when you take range 2, really that's, you've got your Dark Trooper leader who can cohere 4 inches back to their back guy. Then you've got range 2 from that to the unit leader. You're talking about almost range 3.
Yeah, that's about 16 inches.
Yeah, so it becomes a lot longer.
Yeah.
Similarly with there are some sorts, there are effects like that where you can kind of like, through cohesion, you can actually end up, Exemplar was really good for that back in the day. But even right now, we see a little bit less of it, but, you could keep Padme in the back, range 2 up, cohered backwards, she'd be beyond, range, and then you attack there. Like, it would be tough for even snipers to like, back in the good old standby sharing days, move in and shoot a standby offer, because technically she'd be so far back they'd have to walk into range 3 of your unit. So lots of things you can do when you talk about cohesion shenanigans.
I think this also applies to when checking your courage bubble for your commander, because I know you have some, you want to have a flank or have a unit getting on objective, always try to put and it's a courage 1, always try to cohere into that courage bubble. Sometimes I've got caught in the I just need to put them all in cover, and I just need to it's, I'll just be honest, it's really easy to get cover these days, so don't really worry about that. But I would put them in within range of your commander, because it's easier to get panicked than it is to get no cover shots right now, in my opinion. Yeah.
I think too, right? From what I understand, the whole cohesion system Legion uses, as far as move the unit leader, move everyone around them, it's pretty unique as far as these sorts of games go. So it might not be intuitive if you're coming from another game system of how can I actually not break this, because there's nothing too crazy, but how can I really utilize this to get those small edges in a competitive environment? Because that's a lot of what it is, right? Getting every last ounce, squeezing that, squeezing every last drop out of your army and your list.
Not really it's not really triggers, but it's more tactics and remembering just kind of how the rules work, and that's kind of what you want to really go for. Yeah,
and the good thing with this, it's not really weird gotcha interactions. No, it's not haha, see, I forward cohered, you fool. But there's lots of good stuff you can do, and I think to kind of bring it home, when we're talking about measuring, it's just, you want to always be aware of what your ranges look like. If we're talking about that panic bubble, nothing feels worse than I thought I was in, but I was measuring and I'm actually just out. I could have cohered in when I moved these guys, and I just wasn't thinking about it because I was assuming too much.
That also happens a lot when giving orders out. I'll give order out. Always be measuring.
That's the big takeaway from this one. Always be measuring. So as far as what you can and can't use, the rules say, hey, you can pre-measure. You just can't have multiples of the same kind of tool out, right? So you can have a range ruler out, critically up to range 5. You can't have a jerry-rig a range 6-7 ruler, but you can have a range 5 ruler out. But you can't have a range 3 and a range 2 and be using them separately. I don't agree with how those rules are written. I think it would speed up the game quite a bit if you could use multiples at once. But hey, them's the rules. Whatever.
Now,
that's my own personal gripe.
Personally, I have done 2 things, and it's all just whatever you and your opponent kind of agrees on. Yeah. Of course, if a judge comes and be hey, that's illegal, just know that is illegal. But you and your opponent can't agree on that. Yeah.
Well, and again, this is why I think these rules are stupid. Usually the justification is, it speeds up the game. But if I'm trying to measure, hey, if I do this, what's this range look like? It's way faster to put 2 range rulers down and see it all at once versus I measure this. Okay, then I go over here and measure this. Okay, I have to remember that spot, double check. It's just way more. So in a casual game, 100%, just check with your opponent. I'm hey, you cool if I just put 2 tools down? Yeah. And if you've got that repertoire and they're cool with it,
and hey, I'm not going to tell you not. Yeah, most of the time they'll say yes because they'll want to do it as well.
Exactly. But be aware, if you're going to these we've got lots of big events coming up, that's the time when, you got to be careful. And if they say, hey, no, don't do that, hey, yep, they're completely in the right. You don't have a leg to stand on.
Yeah.
But if you both agree, I don't see anything problematic with it.
Now, just for clarification, you can have a measurement tool and a movement tool.
Exactly.
So one of both, just for clarification.
But you can't have two
different
movement tools. So again, that's where it comes in handy that range 1 is 6 inches, and a speed 2 move with a small base trooper is almost 6 inches.
6 inches, yeah.
So that if I'm trying to measure a double move, well, I can't put two movement tools on the table. That's not super useful anyways because I don't have the base size. But I can put a range 2 stick on the table, make sure I have a little bit of wiggle room, and then I know I can double move onto the objective or whatever. So that is the important thing. So you can use range rulers, you can use movement tools, and you can use a silhouette. So if I'm like, if I move this unit up here behind this rock, how hidden will I be? I can take a silhouette and put that down. And I haven't committed to moving, it's pre-measuring. So you can say, hey, can you see me from this angle? How far out do you have to go to be able to see the corner of my silhouette? That's all pre-measuring, that's all kosher, that's all good. One thing that I see a bunch, but you can't do, and I would not be I would not let people do this because I think it's an unfair advantage. I don't think there's any advantage to using 2 tools at once. I think that's just a time saver. Yeah. But sometimes people will use like a base. So they'll put the range 2 tool down, the speed 2 move, put a base down, or like a defeated miniature if they have one of those. They'll put it down as if that was the unit moving, and then put another speed 2 move down and move it just to see here's what a double move gets me.
Yeah.
You can't, that's pre-measuring with a base. You're not allowed to use a base.
Yes.
And it gives you better information than it would be guesstimating otherwise. So for me personally, I would draw the line at that. Some people are cool with it. Some people play with it. Again, if you and your opponent are both doing it, who am I to say to not? But if you're lined up for me on the other side of the event, heck no. I'm gonna get your ass.
It's
DQ instantly.
Oh man, yeah. If it's a casual game, it's your game. If it's a competitive tournament, it's the judge's game. Or gotta follow the rules.
And hey,
no homebrew
I realize
stuff.
People might say, "Hey, Matt, that's hypocrisy." But again, in my opinion, I think one is I'm doing the same measurements I would have done. I'm just doing them quicker, and the other for me is I'm doing measurements I'm not usually allowed to do because there's a lot of close calls, honestly, and putting down range. Let's say I've got Boba Fett and I'm trying to see if I'm going to make melee. I have to guesstimate what it's going to look like when I place his miniature at the end of my range speed 3 tool.
Yeah.
If I actually put a base there and know for sure, that's a big advantage. Knowing that, yes, I will be stuck in melee versus, I will be a sitting duck out in the open. So it's not allowed and you can get advantages from doing it. So personally, I would say no. But
yeah, and I would say the more you guesstimate, the more you know, your guesstimation gets a little bit more accurate.
For sure, exactly. It's a practice thing.
Yeah,
it's a practice thing.
I think this whole game and even measurements just a practice thing.
Yes, and that's why, again, big takeaway, beautiful segue there. Just always be measuring, right?
Always be measuring.
Especially, don't take 20 minutes on your turn to measure everything. But if you're measuring throughout the game, you're just going to have an idea of where everything's at.
Yes.
When it's opponent's turn and they're going, that's again when you should be measuring. Not so much as I'd say I'm a pretty fast player. I measured a ton. It's not like you by measuring you're going to be necessarily a slow player. You just got to get used to it. Real life, it's not like TTS where you can just say, hey, bring up all the range bands. But TTS is really good if you want to practice and get used to measuring because it's so easy. Real life, it's still pretty easy.
Yeah.
Keep those movement sticks out. Just reminding yourself, hey, what is my command range?
Boys, let's go.
What's my command range? What are these guys? What are these guys at range of? Mm-hmm. This, that, the other thing.
Yeah, and one last final tip that I probably leave is just it's okay to ask your opponent, hey, can you hold up range 3 to this unit, their unit, and just have them hold it. And so that way your opponent kind of knows, just okay, if they make that move, then I know that the opponent like confirms that measurement for you.
Yeah, because
I do that a lot.
Angle wise, you just can't. You're looking at it from like the side, so you might be putting the tool down thinking it's at range 3, but if it's up close to their side, they can look at top down. And then you have an exact idea of where range 3 is or whatever, so you know if you can move there. So great thing. Yeah, your opponents, your opponents, but you're playing the game together, right?
For sure.
There's always a dialogue, and there's, you can help each other determine game state. It's not like you're saying, hey, what should I do here? I mean, hey, you can ask me what you want to do here. I'll give you really bad advice, but you can ask me.
Yeah, this is not a gotcha game for sure at all.
Yeah, but if you're asking me to say, hey, put that right on the base of your miniature, measure range 3 from here, I'm gonna do that. Obviously, it would be very poor sportsmanship and basically cheating if I was like, that's what range 3 is, and I was putting it at a weird spot. So always be measuring, always be talking. That's and have
measurement,
fun.
Communication, and have fun.
Exactly.
That's all we're here for Legion for, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's all we got for you for the listeners
Trying to keep
today.
it. Yeah, Seth got mad at me.
I did not.
Throwing chairs around. For extending the last few episodes with all my ramblings. So keeping it a bit tighter for you guys.
Oh my gosh. Hey, we just know we've got. I'm gonna quote someone. I forgot who said this, but we've been known as the wildly efficient podcast. So we want to stick to that. Yeah. Wildly efficient, whatever that means.
Perfect. And when you think wildly efficient, think of
could
Gungans.
Go either way. Yeah, think of Gungans.
Think of Gungans. They're the most efficient race. Yeah.
Wildly efficient.
So stay efficient, gang, and stay gunkin'.
This has been the Bombad Generals.
Listening to Bombad Generals is not scientifically proven to make you a better Legion player. Side effects may include bad dice rolls, missed triggers, aim losses, bankruptcy, divorce, vomiting, and sudden death. Ask your doctor if Bombad Generals is right for you.